congratulations to all three of you. It's been an incredible morning just listening to your responses to the questions posed. Dr. Richmond, let me ask you, based on your career and experiences with DOE, I'm curious to hear more about your thoughts on the current status of the U.S. workforce when it comes to RD&D for new technologies. Is there more that the United States government needs to be doing to enhance STEM education in order to attract more scientists and researchers into this field, knowing that the 21st century is going to take us in this innovation economy? I'm curious your thoughts on that.
Thank you, Senator, for that question, because it's one that I'm as passionate about the workforce as I am about innovation. I have worked with many of the DOE lab leadership over the years, even doing research on issues of workforce in their laboratories to try to understand how we can increase not only the number of women and minorities that are in their laboratories, but also get them into leadership positions, which then, of course, we all know makes a big difference. I think there's much that we can do in the educational arena to increase the number of students going into STEM. But I must also say that one thing that I think is oftentimes missed is that what we really lose out on in this country is this retention of students that want to be scientists at 16 or 18 and then aren't by the time they're 22 or 24. We are ranked one of the lowest countries in the world with regards to retention. That's embarrassing. We have to work harder on that retention. And so that's why I believe really strongly, and especially for women and underrepresented groups, because their numbers are the lowest. And so I do believe that there are things that we can do at the undergraduate, graduate level and above, and of course K through 12. But if I'm talking about retention, that's where the problem child is.
And I agree. And listen, this is an area, as we're looking at the new legislation, whether it's this bipartisan legislation that we're working on now or in the future, the workforce is key. And bringing this workforce along with us, but giving them the opportunities and retaining them in this kind of space for innovation and science is so important. So, if you have ideas, I'm looking forward to working with you around the retention issue. This is an important part of the legislation that I'm working on, bringing that workforce along, but really focusing on how we incentivize, how do we engage, whether it is learning for the first time around STEM or retraining or taking the skills that you already have and transitioning them. I mean, there's a lot of work in this space that we need to do. So whatever ideas you have on it, I'm open to listening to you.
Well,
so
I would be thrilled to no end to work with you on this. I think in the sphere of community colleges, but in addition, thinking of graduate school, we are paying our graduate students, who are the seed corn of our future, at levels that you have to ask the graduate students why they would even go to graduate school being paid the level that they're being paid for 5 or 6 years in their 20s or 7 years in their 20s. We have to seriously, as a nation, look, and across the agencies, look how we can make sure that we are attracting the best and brightest and that they can afford to do the training to make them to take on leadership roles. So I would be thrilled to work with you on any aspect of that.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I know my time is running short. Dr. Berhe, let me ask you about this. This is another area that I don't think we're as focused on as we should be. As we look at the global competition over new technologies, it's the standards setting process. Standard specifications define performance requirements for materials, for products and services related technologies around the world. And I've watched as China has already established goals to set global standards for emerging technologies like 5G, internet, the Internet of Things, artificial intelligence, and other technologies that impact the energy sector. I'm curious if you have thoughts on this. Can you discuss the importance of U.S. involvement in the standards setting process? We cannot forget that. I would love to hear your thoughts.
Thank you, Senator. I agree this is a really important area. Some of the efforts on setting standards is beyond the purview of the Office of Science, obviously. But if you think about contributions that the office and the research that enables can, the best way we can make sure that the standards that we think are important are set is to out-innovate and out-compete everybody in having the best science and technology products out there in the most efficient systems. And I think we could do that, and we must do that. We have to keep doing so if we're going to ensure U.S. competitiveness in a variety of areas that are related to the topics you discussed. I would love opportunity. I know we don't have time right now, but I would love the opportunity to talk to you and work with you on these.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I have one more question with Chairman's indulgence, if that's all right. Ms. Stockelberg, is it? Let me ask you this, because this is another area that I have focused on, and we've talked about oil and gas leasing in this Energy Committee ad nauseum. Let me just say that. But in recent years, the BLM has spent an inordinate amount of time and resources offering vast acreages for oil and gas development on lands where the oil and gas industry doesn't really have a development interest, and on lands that have little to no potential for development. What does that mean? That makes these lands available for leasing, only fuels, it really only fuels a speculative industry and wastes the BLM resources while locking up the land from being managed for other purposes, like a wildlife habitat preservation, outdoor recreation, grazing. That happens in my state as well. So I introduced the End Speculative Oil and Gas Leasing Act, and what it does is it prohibits BLM from offering leases on lands determined to have low or no drilling potential, requiring BLM to evaluate eligible lands for the development potential instead. And so my question to you is I'd hope that you would have an open mind around this and be willing to work with me, or at least take a look at the legislation and give me your input or the department's input around this legislation.
Senator, I am familiar with your legislation. I think it's very interesting, and I definitely, if I'm confirmed, look forward to working with you and others on this committee on reforming the leasing program. It's a priority of the Secretary. If I'm confirmed, it would be a priority of mine as well.
Thank you, and thank you, all three.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Hoeven.